The first sign of trouble was not a shout, but the clinical, metallic click, click, click of a measuring tape being retracted. It was a sound that belonged in a workshop, not in the sacred quiet of a Saturday morning in our own backyard. I looked up from the book I was reading on our new patio. Two figures stood just on the other side of our property line, silhouetted against the manicured green of the common area. One was a nondescript man in a polo shirt, holding a clipboard. The other, the source of the clicking, was Karen Morgan, president of the Crestview Manor Homeowners Association. She wore a crisp, white visor that cast a severe shadow over her face, and her expression was one of intense, surgical focus, with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. She extended the tape measure again, this time from one of our new pergola's support posts to an invisible point in the air. 36 feet from the designated survey marker. "Stan," she announced, her voice carrying across the lawn with the unnatural clarity of a stage whisper. "And the roof slats are angled at 47 degrees. Note that." Stan, the other board member, scribbled dutifully. They were on the common area, a technicality that made their presence both an invasion and perfectly permissible. It was a masterful display of passive aggression, designed to make us feel scrutinized, exposed, and powerless on our own property. I felt a hot flush of anger creep up my neck. We had sunk every penny of our savings into this house, into this yard, into this specific, painstakingly designed pergola. It wasn't just wood and screws. It was a promise of peace. I stood up, placing my book on the chair. "Can I help you two?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Karen's head snapped toward me. A smile, thin and sharp as a paper cut, appeared on her lips. "James, good morning. Stan and I are just conducting a routine architectural control committee inspection. We noticed the new structure." She said the word structure, as if it were a contagion. "It's a pergola," I said. "We submitted the plans to the ACC through the management portal 2 months ago. It was approved. I have the email right here." I patted the pocket of my shorts, where my phone was. "Ah, yes. The initial approval," she said, as if reminiscing about a distant, naive time. "That's for the basic concept. The final inspection ensures compliance with all sections of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. As I'm sure you understand, the rules apply to everyone equally." Her smile never reached her eyes, which were scanning the pergola, the garden beds, the very placement of our patio furniture, cataloging every detail for future use. "And is there a problem?" She let the silence hang for a moment, retracting the tape with another sharp click. "We're concerned it may be in violation of CC&R Section 8.4.2, she said, her tone dripping with feigned regret. "View corridor preservation. We'll have to review the file and get back to you." She turned to leave, Stan trailing in her wake like a pilot fish. The message was clear. The approval email meant nothing. The months of planning meant nothing. Our sanctuary was subject to her whim, her interpretation, her power. I watched them walk away, her upright posture a declaration of authority. Back inside, my wife, Laura, was at the kitchen window, watching. She had seen the whole performance. She simply raised an eyebrow, a silent question passing between us. I shook my head, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The battle for Crestview Manor had just begun, and the opening shot was the click of a tape measure. We had chosen this house for its quietude. House number 112 on a sleepy cul-de-sac, a single-story ranch with wide doorways and a flat, secluded backyard that backed up to a stretch of wooded common area. For us, it was more than a house. It was a fortress of tranquility, a place designed for healing. 2 years prior, a distracted driver had run a red light, and, in an instant, Laura's life, our life, was irrevocably altered. The accident had shattered her left leg and damaged her spine, confining her to a wheelchair. But the physical injuries were only part of the story. Laura, who had spent 3 decades as a top-tier corporate litigator, a shark in a world of sharks, renowned for her razor-sharp intellect and an almost supernatural ability to dismantle her opponent's arguments under cross-examination, was forced into an early retirement. The chronic pain and the physical demands of the courtroom were too much. She had lost her career, a core piece of her identity, and the transition had been brutal. This house, this yard, this quiet life was supposed to be the antidote. It was a fresh start. A place where the loudest sound was the chirping of birds, not the gavel of a courtroom or the screech of tires. We poured our life savings into making it perfect. We'd had a contractor install a discreet ramp to the front door, redesigned the master bath, and, most importantly, transformed the backyard. Laura had sketched the design herself, a sprawling stone patio, raised garden beds she could tend from her chair, and, at its center, the pergola. It was a beautiful structure of dark cedar, with clean, modern lines and adjustable louvers on top. It was her haven within our haven, a place where she could sit in the shade, read, and feel the breeze without the oppressive glare of the sun. It was a symbol of our new life, built with care and, we thought, with the full permission of the Crestview Manor HOA. The day the pergola was completed, I saw a light in Laura's eyes that had been missing for 2 years. She'd wheeled herself beneath it, tilted her head back to look at the sky through the slats, and smiled a genuine, unguarded smile. "It's perfect. James," she'd whispered, "we can finally just be." That feeling of peace lasted exactly 4 days. Then came Karen's inspection. I tried to brush it off. She's just a busybody with a clipboard. I told Laura that evening. She's trying to throw her weight around. The plans were approved. There's nothing she can do. Laura, who was sitting at the dining room table, scrolling through the 300-page PDF of the Crestview Manor CC&Rs I'd downloaded, didn't look up. People like her don't need a reason. James. They manufacture one. Look at this. She pointed to a line on her tablet screen. It was section 8.4.2, the one Karen had cited. No structure, fence, or landscaping element shall be erected or maintained in such a way as to materially impede a designated view corridor as outlined in the community plat map. What does materially impede even mean, I asked. It's completely subjective. Exactly, Laura said, her voice laced with the weary tone of someone who had spent a lifetime dissecting intentionally ambiguous legal language. Subjectivity is a weapon in the hands of a bureaucrat. It allows for selective enforcement. She was right. Of course. Laura was always right about these things. Her mind, honed by decades of legal combat, saw the traps and loopholes others missed. She had retired from the law, but the law had not retired from her, while she had lost the physical ability to command a courtroom. Her analytical mind was as formidable as ever. It was a strength she now kept hidden, preferring the quiet company of books and her garden to the adversarial world she'd left behind. Karen Morgan had no idea who she was dealing with. She saw a woman in a wheelchair, a symbol of vulnerability. She couldn't see the brilliant legal strategist watching her every move, analyzing her tactics, and quietly preparing a defense. The official notice arrived 10 days after the inspection. It wasn't a friendly email or a note left on the door. It was a cold, formal letter sent via certified mail, a deliberate act of procedural escalation that required a signature and served as undeniable proof of receipt. The envelope felt heavy with malice. I signed for it at the door and brought it into the kitchen where Laura was arranging flowers from her garden beds. I opened it and read it aloud. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I began, my voice tight with forced calm. This letter serves as a formal violation notice regarding the unapproved structure erected on your property at 112 Crestview Court. Following a review by the Architectural Control Committee, it has been determined that the pergola, as constructed, is in violation of CC&R FAR 8.4.2 View Corridor Preservation. The letter went on to claim that the structure materially impedes the view of the wooded common area from an adjacent property. Our property backed directly onto the woods. The only adjacent property with a potential line of sight through our yard was Karen Morgan's, which sat on a small rise behind and to the left of us. The demand is the complete and immediate removal of the offending structure. I finished, my hands clenching the paper. We have 14 days to comply, or the board will begin levying fines of $100 per day. Laura looked up from her flowers, her expression serene. Check the letterhead, she said. Who signed it? I scanned the bottom. It's signed by Karen Morgan as board president and co-signed by the other two board members, Stan Gable and Cynthia Moore, and it was sent by Alliance Property Management, our management company. So she has the board's support, and she's using the management company as the official channel. Laura mused. She's creating a paper trail, insulating herself behind procedure. She's not an amateur. What do we do? I asked, the anger giving way to a sickening sense of helplessness. We can't afford to take it down. We certainly can't afford $100 a day in fines. We follow the process, Laura said, her voice steady. First, you don't get angry. You get organized. James, I want you to start a binder, a physical binder. Every letter, every email, every photo, date everything. We fight them with their own tools, documentation and procedure. That evening, I bought a thick 3-ring binder and a set of dividers. The first document I placed inside was the certified letter, its green signature slip stapled neatly to the top. It felt like the opening entry in a war journal. My first attempt at a reasonable resolution was a spectacular failure. Following Laura's advice, I drafted a polite, factual email to the property manager at Alliance, a woman named Deborah. I attached the original ACC approval email and a photo of the pergola taken from the common area, showing that it barely obstructed any view. I respectfully requested that the board reconsider the violation. Deborah's reply came 2 days later. It was a masterpiece of corporate non-commitment. Thank you for your email. It read, the board has received your correspondence and reviewed the matter. Their decision stands. Your next opportunity to address the board directly will be at the monthly meeting on Tuesday, the 18th. The monthly meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile, soulless room with beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and uncomfortable folding chairs. About 15 residents were scattered around the room. Karen, Stan, and Cynthia sat at a long folding table at the front, the very picture of suburban authority. When the meeting was opened to homeowner comments, I stood up and walked to the microphone. I calmly introduced myself and began to explain the situation, holding up a copy of my approval email. Before I could get 2 sentences out, Karen held up her hand. Mr. Taylor, thank you for your input, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. However, this is not the proper forum for discussing individual violation disputes. You are not on the official agenda. We have a process for appeals, which you were advised of in your notice. But the appeal was already denied without any discussion, I countered, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. I'm just trying to understand the basis for the decision. The basis, Karen said. leaning into her microphone, is Section 8.4.2. The board has made its determination. We have other business to attend to. She then looked out at the audience. I know this can be an emotional issue for some homeowners when they are found to be out of compliance, but we must insist on a civil and orderly meeting. She had done it in a single stroke, dismissed my legitimate query, shut me down with procedure, and painted me as an emotional and disruptive homeowner in a public forum. I stood there for a moment, utterly defeated, the gazes of my neighbors burning into my back. I retreated to my seat, my face hot with humiliation. The board then moved to its next agenda item, ratifying fines. Stan made the motion. I moved to levy a fine of $100 against Lot 112 for the violation cited in the notice dated October 5th, with additional daily fines of $25 to commence if the violation is not cured within 7 days. Cynthia seconded. Karen called for a vote. 3 hands went up. The motion passes, she declared, banging a small gavel on the table. It was a sham, a piece of political theater designed to rubber stamp a decision that had already been made. I walked out of that clubhouse, feeling a profound and terrifying sense of entrapment. We were caught in a bureaucratic spiderweb, and the spider was smiling at us from the front of the room. When I got home and told Laura what had happened, she simply nodded. Good, she said, much to my surprise. Good, Laura. They fined us. They publicly humiliated me. Yes, she said, her eyes focused and intense. And they did it in a public meeting, which means it's in the official minutes. They have now created a record of their own unreasonable behavior. The binder just got a new entry. Now, the real work begins. Reason had failed. The process was a weapon being used against us. Laura was right. We had to build a case, not with emotion, but with cold, hard facts. The fight for our pergola had transformed into a full-blown investigation. My first stop was the county recorder's office, a cavernous, dusty building downtown that smelled of old paper and bureaucratic indifference. I spent an entire afternoon poring over microfiche films and enormous, brittle plat maps for the Crestview Manor development, which had been filed back in the late 1990s. After 2 hours, I found it, the master plat map. And there, scrawled in faint blue ink, were the easements. I took a high-resolution photo of the relevant section with my phone. The view corridor easement was real. It was a narrow, trapezoidal strip of land that cut directly across the back of our property, specifically designed to protect the view from Lot 118, Karen Morgan's lot. Laura had been right again. The rule wasn't for the community. It was for Karen. Next, I formally requested, in writing, copies of all board meeting minutes from the past 3 years, as was my right under state law. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived from Alliance Property Management. I spent hours reading through them, highlighting any mention of architectural reviews or view corridor disputes. For the most part, it was a tedious record of pool maintenance contracts and landscaping bids. But then, I found it, the minutes from a meeting 2 years ago. A homeowner, Cynthia Moore, now a board member, and Karen's loyal ally, had requested a variance to build an enormous 2-story sunroom addition on the back of her house. A section of the minutes detailing the vote was blatantly blacked out with a thick marker. This is it, I told Laura, pointing to the redacted block of text. They're hiding something. Laura examined the page. A redaction is an admission of guilt, she said softly. They're telling us where to dig. She looked up the state's Common Interest Development Act. It stipulated that homeowners had the right to review unredacted minutes, with exceptions only for pending litigation or personnel matters. This was neither. Laura drafted a new letter for me to send to Alliance. It was a masterpiece of legal precision. Citing the specific state statute, and demanding a complete, unredacted copy of the minutes within the legally mandated 10-day window. It was polite, professional, and carried the unmistakable weight of someone who knew their rights down to the subsection. While we waited for their response, I hired a professional land surveyor, a retired county engineer named Arthur Evans. I wanted an independent, legally defensible confirmation of our property lines and the exact location and language of that easement. Arthur arrived a few days later, a methodical man with a weathered face and eyes that had spent a lifetime measuring the world. He spent a morning with his transit and GPS equipment, planting small orange flags at the corners of our lot. 2 days later, he delivered his report. It came with a certified copy of the original easement deed he had pulled from the county archives. What he found was the twist that changed everything. The plat map shows the easement. No doubt about it, Arthur explained, spreading the documents on our kitchen table. It's exactly where they say it is. However, he tapped a paragraph in the dense text of the deed. The devil is in the details. The legal language here is very specific. Laura and I leaned in. He pointed to a clause. The easement restricts the erection of any temporary structures, including but not limited to tents, sheds, or play equipment, which would materially impede the view. I stared at him. Temporary structures. That's what it says. Arthur confirmed. Your pergola has concrete footings. It's a permanent addition to the home, legally speaking. This easement doesn't apply to it at all. We had them. It was a rookie mistake on their part, a failure to read the foundational legal documents of the very community they governed. They had built their entire case on a rule they didn't understand. That same afternoon, another certified letter arrived. This one contained the unredacted minutes. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. There, in clear black and white, was the secret they had tried to hide. The board, led by Karen, had unanimously voted to grant Cynthia Moore a variance for her sunroom, a massive, permanent structure that, according to the notes, clearly sat within another residence view corridor. Their justification, as stated in the minutes, was flimsy and absurd. The aesthetic benefit of the proposed improvement is deemed to outweigh the minor view obstruction. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They had granted a variance to one of their own for a far greater violation, then fabricated a case against us based on a misinterpretation of their own rules. This wasn't about a view. It was a personal, targeted attack. And Karen had enlisted her friends on the board to execute it. The motive was becoming clearer, though the final piece was still missing. Why us? Why this pergola? Laura filed the new evidence into the binder. It was now nearly 3 inches thick, a heavy, tangible record of Karen's corruption. She thinks she's building a case against us, Laura said, a grim smile on her face. But all this time, she's been building our case against her. Karen must have sensed that she was losing control, because her next move was one of pure, desperate cruelty. The fines against us had been steadily accumulating, and the total was now over $1,000. Then came the letter we had been dreading. It was from a law firm, retained by the HOA, and its language was chillingly direct, a formal notice of intent to lien, if the fines and legal fees were not paid within 30 days. The association would place a lien on our house, a legal claim that could eventually lead to foreclosure. The threat was no longer about a daily fine. It was about losing our home. The sanctuary we had built was on the verge of being seized by a petty tyrant over a garden structure. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my resolve. Laura, this is an official legal threat, I said, the letter shaking in my hand. They could actually try to force a sale. They can try, Laura said, her voice a rock in my sea of anxiety. But a lien is a tool of intimidation. It's expensive for them to foreclose. And it requires a court order. She's betting we'll panic and give in. We won't. But Karen wasn't just escalating the legal pressure. She was expanding her battlefield. Her new target was Mrs. Gable, an elderly widow who had lived in Crestview Manor for over 30 years. Mrs. Gable was the moral compass of the neighborhood. A kind, gentle soul whose only passion was her immaculate rose garden. Her husband had planted the first bushes the year they moved in, and she had tended to them lovingly ever since. One afternoon, I saw Karen and Stan standing on the sidewalk in front of Mrs. Gable's house, clipboards in hand. The next day, a bright orange violation notice was stuck to Mrs. Gable's front door. Her crime, her collection of small, decorative garden gnomes, which had been nestled among her roses for the better part of a decade. The violation cited a rule against non-approved lawn ornaments. That evening, our friend and neighbor, David, who lived across the street, came over. He looked deeply troubled. "James, I have to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "I overheard Karen talking to Cynthia by the community mailbox. She said she'd be willing to forgive Mrs. Gable's gnome violation if you agreed to take down your pergola. She's using that sweet old woman as leverage against you." The news hit me like a physical blow. This was no longer just about us. Karen was weaponizing the rules to terrorize an innocent, elderly woman, all to win her personal vendetta. It was a moral abyss, a new low that I hadn't thought possible. This was the secondary moral twist Laura had warned me about. The moment a bully reveals their absolute lack of character. We were now faced with a terrible choice. We could continue our fight, knowing that Mrs. Gable would suffer as a consequence, or we could surrender, sacrificing our own home and principles to protect her. That night, I sat with Laura on the patio, under the beautiful, defiant pergola. The moon cast long shadows through its cedar beams. "What do we do?" I whispered. "I can't let her hurt Mrs. Gable." Laura was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the dark woods beyond our yard. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but resolute. "We don't back down. We expand the fight. This isn't just about our pergola anymore. It's about Mrs. Gable's gnomes. It's about every homeowner she has ever bullied. We're not just going to defend ourselves. James, we're going to liberate this neighborhood." The HOA scheduled a special hearing to vote on authorizing the lien. Notice was posted on the community bulletin board and sent to us via certified mail. It was to be held in 2 weeks, in the clubhouse. Homeowners were invited to attend. I was given a 5-minute time slot to present my case before the board and the community. 5 minutes. That's all they were giving me to save my home and defend my neighbor. Karen thought she was setting a trap. She had no idea she was setting the stage. The community clubhouse buzzed with a nervous energy I had never felt before. Every folding chair was taken, and residents stood packed along the back and side walls. Word of the showdown had spread through Crestview Manor like wildfire. This wasn't just another boring HOA meeting. It was a public trial, and the entire neighborhood had come to serve as the jury. At the front table sat the board Karen, flanked by Stan Gable and Cynthia Moore. Karen wore a severe navy blue blazer, her face a mask of smug confidence. She believed she had us cornered. The threat of the lien, the pressure on Mrs. Gable, she saw it as her checkmate. In front of them, a large projection screen had been set up, next to a podium with a microphone. A digital timer was displayed on the screen, its stark red numbers reading 500. I sat in the front row with Laura. Our binder, now thick with evidence, rested on my lap. Mrs. Gable was a few seats down, looking small and worried. I gave her a reassuring nod. Laura reached over and squeezed my hand. "Just the facts. "James," she whispered, "don't let them see your anger. Let the documents do the talking." Karen banged her gavel. This special hearing of the Crestview Manor Homeowners Association is now in session. The purpose of this meeting is to vote on Board Resolution 2023-07, authorizing legal counsel to place a lien on the property at 112 Crestview Court for failure to cure outstanding violations and pay associated fines. The homeowner, Mr. Taylor, has been allotted 5 minutes to speak. She gestured to the podium with a flick of her wrist. "Your time starts now." I walked to the podium and placed my thumb drive into the laptop connected to the projector. The timer started its relentless countdown. I took a deep breath. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady and amplified by the cheap microphone. "My name is James Taylor. The board claims I am in violation of CC&R Section 8.4.2, the View Corridor Preservation Rule. They claim my pergola obstructs the view from Miss Morgan's property." My first slide appeared on the screen. It was the high-resolution image of the county plat map. I used the laser pointer to trace the narrow easement. This is the official plat map. As you can see, the easement was drawn for the exclusive benefit of a single lot number 118, Ms. Morgan's lot. This isn't a community rule. It's a personal one. A murmur went through the crowd. "But the question is," I continued, clicking to the next slide, "what does the easement actually restrict?" On the screen appeared the crisp, scanned text from the official deed Arthur Evans had uncovered. I highlighted the key phrase, "The legal deed, filed with the county, restricts only temporary structures. My pergola, with its concrete footings, is a permanent home improvement, as defined in Appendix B of our own CC&Rs. Therefore, Section 8.4.2 does not, and has never, applied to it. The entire basis for this violation is factually incorrect." The murmuring grew louder. I saw Stan and Cynthia exchange a nervous glance. Karen's smile tightened. The clock read 3:45. Now, one might ask why the board would pursue a violation that has no legal basis. Perhaps it's a simple mistake. But let's look at the board's own history of enforcement. The next two slides appeared side by side. On the left was the redacted page from the meeting minutes. On the right was the unredacted version. "This is what the board initially provided me," I said, pointing to the blacked-out text. "And this is the truth they tried to hide." Gasps rippled through the room. I read the text aloud. The board unanimously approved a variance for board member Cynthia Moore's two-story sunroom, a massive permanent structure, explicitly noting that it outweighed a minor view obstruction. This is a textbook case of selective and preferential enforcement. Cynthia sank lower in her chair. Her face flushed. The clock showed 2:10. Now came the moral choice. "This pattern of targeted harassment isn't limited to me," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "It extends to the most vulnerable among us." A new slide appeared, a beautiful photo of Mrs. Gable's award-winning rose garden, complete with its charming gnome family. Next to it, I displayed a copy of the violation notice she had received. "The board is threatening Mrs. Gable, a 30-year resident, with fines over these harmless garden gnomes. This isn't about maintaining standards. This is about intimidation. It's an abuse of power." Mrs. Gable looked up, tears welling in her eyes. The audience was now openly glaring at the board. The clock read 1:30. So we have to ask the real question, why? Why fabricate a violation against my family? Why harass an elderly woman? I paused, letting the question hang in the air. I believe the answer is financial. My final slide appeared. It was a copy of the public business filing for Prestige Patio and Sunroom. the company that had built Cynthia's addition. The owner was listed as Mark Jensen. "And who is Mark Jensen?" I asked. "He is Karen Morgan's brother-in-law." The room erupted in shouts. Karen leaped to her feet. "This is out of order. This is a private matter." "It became an HOA matter when you started directing business to your family," I said calmly, projecting my voice over the noise. "And it became my business when I discovered this." I clicked to the final image. It was a scanned copy of a canceled check. A check from Prestige Patio and Sunroom, made out to Karen Morgan for $2,000. In the memo line, one word was clearly legible: referral. A collective, unified gasp sucked the air from the room. It was the smoking gun, the kickback. Her motive was never the view. It was punishment for us using a different contractor, for denying her a cut. The timer on the screen beeped, its red numbers flashing 000. My time was up. I looked at Karen. Her face was ashen. Her confident mask shattered into a million pieces. The room was in stunned, absolute silence. The silence in the clubhouse was a living thing, thick and heavy. Every eye was fixed on Karen Morgan, who stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape. The color drained from her face. The canceled check, her casual corruption projected 10 feet high, seemed to burn itself onto the collective retina of the community. It was Stan Gable who broke the spell. He pushed his chair back with a loud scrape, the sound echoing in the stillness. I was not aware of any of this," he stammered, looking not at Karen, but at the angry faces in the audience. He was a man frantically searching for the nearest lifeboat on a sinking ship. Cynthia Moore, avoiding everyone's gaze, mumbled into the microphone. "The board takes these allegations very seriously." The property manager from Alliance, Deborah, who had been sitting quietly in the back, briskly walked to the podium. She took the microphone, her face a professional mask of grave concern. "Alliance Property Management is an independent contractor," she announced, her voice crisp and clear. "We act solely on the direction of the Board of Directors. In light of the evidence presented, we recommend the board immediately table Resolution 2023-07. A resident in the back shouted, "Table it! You should be apologizing." A chorus of agreement followed. The fear that Karen had cultivated for years had evaporated in 5 minutes, replaced by a righteous wave of homeowner anger. Stan, sweating profusely, banged the gavel weakly. "All in favor of tabling the motion to authorize a lien?" he asked. His hand shot up, followed by Cynthia's. Karen remained motionless. "The motion is tabled," he declared. Another board member, one who had been largely silent during Karen's reign, made a new motion. "I move that the board formally rescind all violations and fines against Lot 112 and Lot 14, effective immediately." "Second," yelled a dozen voices from the audience. The vote was instantaneous. "Furthermore," the board member continued, emboldened, "I move to censure President Morgan for conduct unbecoming of a board member and to authorize a full, independent forensic audit of the association's financials for the past 5 years." Before the vote could even be called, Karen grabbed her purse and, without a word, pushed through the crowd and fled the clubhouse. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing her defeat. The resolution passed unanimously. The revolution was complete. As the meeting dissolved into a chaotic buzz of excited conversation, neighbors swarmed me, shaking my hand, patting me on the back. Mrs. Gable hugged me, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you, son," she whispered. "You gave me my home back." David clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it. Man, you actually did it." I looked for Laura. She was right where I had left her, sitting calmly in her chair, a small, knowing smile on her lips. She had watched the entire spectacle unfold with the detached satisfaction of a master strategist watching her plan come to perfect fruition. As I walked toward her, the weight of the past 6 weeks finally lifted from my shoulders. The pergola, our sanctuary, was safe. But we had won something far more valuable than that. We had won justice. The aftermath of the hearing was swift and decisive. The independent audit, launched within a week, uncovered a systemic pattern of kickbacks and cronyism. Karen had been steering contracts for landscaping, pool maintenance, and architectural modifications to preferred vendors, all owned by friends or family for years, collecting referral fees on each one. She, Stan, and Cynthia resigned from the board in disgrace, less than 48 hours before the auditors were scheduled to formally present their findings, facing potential civil and criminal liability. All three put their houses up for sale within the month, desperate to cover their mounting legal costs and escape the community they had once ruled with an iron fist. A new interim board was appointed, and their first act was to draft a formal, written apology to our family and to Mrs. Gable, which was mailed to every homeowner in Crestview Manor. They also began the process of completely overhauling the CC&Rs, focusing on removing ambiguous language and establishing a clear, transparent, and fair system for appeals and enforcement. At the next community meeting, I was nominated to lead a new oversight committee, tasked with ensuring the board remained accountable to the residents it served. I accepted. The peace we had sought by moving here had been shattered. But in its place, we had helped forge a real community, one built on fairness and mutual respect. A few months later, on a warm spring evening, Laura and I were sitting on our patio, under the pergola. The scent of roses from Mrs. Gable's garden drifted over the fence. The last of the for sale signs on Karen's old lawn had finally come down that morning. David, our neighbor, stopped by with a bottle of wine to celebrate. We sat and talked for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. "You know, James," David said, swirling the wine in his glass, "I still can't get over how you did it. The way you put that whole presentation together. The plat maps, the deed records, demanding the unredacted minutes. It was like a professional takedown. How did you know exactly which documents to ask for, which stones to turn over?" I smiled and looked at Laura. Her face was illuminated by the soft glow of the patio lights, and her expression was one of quiet contentment. She took a sip of her wine before answering. Her voice was calm, measured, and carried the faint, unmistakable echo of old authority. "I spent 30 years suing corporations for hiding documents," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "A petty tyrant with a clipboard is much, much simpler."